I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Emily.
And last week, we talked about the Friday the 13th murder of Betty Gore, who was killed by her husband's lover and her own friend, Candy Montgomery, with 41 swings of an axe. Last week, we discussed Alan and Candy's affair and the murder itself. This week, we are going to go through the investigation and the trial. Many people disagree with the verdict, but
This is a trial by podcast, so we'll let you be the judge.
Okay, so hello everybody. This is Kelsey here. As you know, we record episodes way far ahead of time. So today you are listening to an episode about Betty Gore. I'm going to put this in the beginning of both episodes, part 1 and part 2. So when we recorded this, I had listened to a couple different podcasts along with all of the research I did. The name of Betty Gore's daughter in those podcasts was pronounced Elisa. And I'm not going to drop names or whatever in case they mispronounce it. I'm not trying to blame someone else. It is my fault. It is Elisa. After we recorded all of these episodes and I did all the research and worked on this for weeks and weeks and we recorded for hours on end and I edited for hours and hours on end, I went back to rewatch the TV show that I am going to mention in this episode. And they are pronouncing the name Alyssa. Okay, this is the daughter. She's not super involved in the story, but she does play a part. So I just wanted to get ahead of it because I know people are going to be upset about that. And honestly, I cannot re-record and re-edit that name every single time it is taken out. So I greatly, sincerely apologize if it is Alyssa and we're saying Elisa. It is spelled A-L-I-S-A. So you can see how when I'm hearing other people say it, Elisa, I thought, okay, Elisa makes more sense than Alyssa. So I am honestly, I've tried to look it up even since realizing this. I've looked it up multiple places and everyone says it differently. So I'm not even sure which one the right one is. If you want to comment and let me know which one is the right one and you want to do it nicely, please do. I would appreciate it. But just wanted to say that ahead of time. I am very sorry if I am saying it the wrong way. So with that being said, let's get back to the recorded episode that we recorded a long time ago. Okay. Let's do a quick recap of last week, and then we're going to get right into it today.
Oh, boy. It was a good one, so I'm excited for part 2.
Yes. So last week, we talked about how Alan and Candy were having an affair. Candy was Betty's pretty much only friend. And then Candy murdered her with an axe, hit her 41 times. And that is kind of where we left off, was Candy standing there all bloodied, just having murdered
with
her
one
friend.
sliced toe, 41 blows deep in the back of her best friend's head. And
Correct.
Here we are.
And here we are. And I think Emily had mentioned at the end of the last episode saying, but wasn't there blood in the bathroom? So there was blood in the bathroom. And this is because Candy cleaned herself up in the Gore's bathroom, even showered at their house and everything.
That's bold to me.
And
you
then
shower in the house with her 1-year-old fucking daughter screaming in the back in the other room.
It's literally the next fucking sentence.
Oh my God.
Yes. And it also just shows you how little information you'll see. She's so dumb. The stuff that she does, because no one listens to true crime. So they don't know. She doesn't know to clean this stuff up, or that they could find her hair in the shower or whatever. So like I said, Candy's cleaning herself up in the Gore's bathroom. And then with baby Bethany crying for help from her crib, Candy just rushes out the front door, leaving the baby there. And of course, like we mentioned before, her foot is just gushing blood from this axe wound. Now, she got back into her station wagon and just started driving home. As soon as she pulled into the garage, she ran upstairs, ripped off her blood-soaked clothes because they were soaked in blood. Soaked. And she actually mentions to, I think it was to the writers of Love and Death, saying that, oh, thank God I was wearing a burgundy shirt that day because it was completely soaked in blood. Now,
so chill about it.
right. So she ran upstairs just ripping these clothes off because they smelled like blood and she couldn't stand it. It was making her sick. So she hops back in the shower, takes a second shower at her own house and washes her clothes, like throwing them in the washing machine and making sure that she put on the same burgundy shirt that she had been wearing because that was what she was wearing when she dropped the kids off at Bible school. So she needed to be wearing the same outfit when she went and picked them up. So she washes the shirt, she puts it back on, she puts on a different pair of jeans, but because her toe was all messed up, she bandaged up the toe. She couldn't wear the sandals that she had been wearing that day. So she puts on tennis shoes instead of the flip-flops that she had been wearing during the crime. And once she's redressed, Candy headed straight to the church to pick up the kids. Which again, it's her kids, but also Betty's daughter, Elisa. Now, by the time she got there, the kids' puppet show that she should have been there for was almost over. So, like, she was very obviously late. And according to the Texas Monthly articles, Candy explained her lateness to the other church moms, saying, quote, "Oh, I went down to Betty's and we just got to talking. And then I looked at my watch and I thought I had time to go to Target and get Father's Day cards. So I drove all the way to Plano. But then when I got there, I realized my watch had stopped and I was late. So I didn't even go in. We're taking Alyssa with us tonight to see The Empire Strikes Back. That reminds me, I'd better go check on the kids," end quote.
That's mind-blowing to me that she's just making all this shit up. Like, she didn't just fucking axe murder her friend 41 times.
And, like, she's being very specific. Like,
yeah, like, oh, I had to go to Target and get this Father's Day card and blah, blah, blah. And, oh, I got to go get Elisa.
Yeah, and she's like, I got to get Elisa. And then she's like, oh, well, I realized, like, I thought I had all this time. And then I realized my watch had stopped. And that's why I was late and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, like, just going way in too much into
yeah,
detail.
like, too much information for, like, the question that, like, you don't need to explain that much why you're late. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because this is, like, she repeats the same exact story over and over.
I was just about to ask if she, like, because that sounds like a very in-depth story. So either she rehearsed that or that was just off the dome and she's gonna fuck it up later. Right. So I was wondering how many times she told that exact story.
It's like as soon as people find out what happened to Betty, they're asking Candy because they know that
like,
they were
you
close
were just there,
or whatever.
yeah.
And it does come out that Candy was the last person to see Betty alive. So people ask her and she goes, oh, and then I did this, and this, and my watch stopped and I went to Target and Father's Day cards and whatever. And it's just very like, it's like not verbatim every time, but it's very, I did this and then this and then this and like all of these little things, the details.
She like makes sure to say it. Where was what's her husband's name?
Pat.
Where was he? Like, did he not notice the fucking slice on her toe?
He was at work.
Oh.
He was just at work. It was just a normal Friday. He was at work. So when she talked to Pat on the phone that day before he came home from work, she told him the exact same thing. I did this and then blah, 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 blah. Like, again, over explaining herself. But she added in to Pat that she had spoken with Betty and she said that Elisa was allowed to stay the night at their house again that night. Oh my God. So he was going to have to take out extra cash for a movie ticket for Elisa. Mm-hmm. Because remember, the family was going to see The Empire Strikes Back that night.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Sign of the times.
I was literally just going to say, what a sign of the times.
Now, the next day, the calls from the community came flooding in to ask Candy if she had heard what happened to Betty. She would tell them, oh, I heard last night. And she'd say it with like this sadness in her voice. Now, one caller in particular added that they had heard that Betty had been killed with an axe. Now, up until this point, Alan had told Candy that they thought Betty had shot herself. Mm-hmm. So Candy, and it just shows you like how naive she is.
Yeah.
Candy was kind of hoping that, oh, they think she shot herself. Like, I didn't do it.
I'm off the hook.
She's very in denial that she did this. Mm-hmm. That's what it seems like. She's trying to convince herself that it like wasn't her. So when this person mentions that Betty had been killed with an axe, it just kind of sent a shiver down her spine. because she was hoping that everyone would think that, Betty shot herself and this whole thing would just go away. But it was not going to go away. If anything, Candy was being flooded with reminders of what she had done. Not only was she receiving calls, but because her and Pat were so close with Betty and Alan, they began receiving sympathy cards in the mail as well. And as any good housewife would, Candy mailed back thank you notes to every single one.
What the fuck?
Now, meanwhile, while Candy was busy thanking everyone for their condolences, the investigators were hard at work. At the time, At the time of Betty's murder, I believe Wiley only had 3 or 4 officers in total. I've read it both ways because it's so small.
It was like our hometown.
No, our hometown is way bigger.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying like there was like, it's like the cops have nothing better to do, so they don't have a lot of them.
True. Let me tell you, they're not used to investigating axe murders.
Yeah.
I'll say that. Now, more than 2 decades had passed since the last murder that took place in Wiley. So to say that they weren't prepared to handle this investigation on their own would be a massive understatement. So for this reason, the Wiley Police Department called in the Collin County Sheriff's Department, as well as Dr. Irving Stone from the Dallas Institute of Forensic Science. Now this guy, Dr. Stone, was the real motherfucking deal. He had helped in many high-profile investigations beforehand, including the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Oh, shit.
Right. Now, when Dr. Stone got to the Gore home to investigate the scene, there were officers everywhere, like all over the scene. And there were at least 12 of the Gore's neighbors standing in the living room chatting.
What the fuck?
While the crime scene was being investigated.
Like, oh, is that where their couch used to be? I don't know. I haven't been here in a while.
Just like
what the fuck?
There's a billion fucking people in the house. It's like crime scene 101 is like
don't
only
let anyone in the
people.
fucking crime scene.
Right.
That even that many cops is like a red flag.
Right. So Dr. Stone immediately cleared all of the unnecessary people
He's
out
like,
of the
all y'all
crime scene.
bitches got to get out. Party's
He was
over.
like, oh my God, these fucking noobs, these fucking police, they don't know what they're doing.
Oh, that sucks.
Now, as far as crime scenes go, I think it's safe to argue that this one was especially gruesome. There was blood everywhere, and Betty was completely unrecognizable. Trigger warning, this is very graphic. She was lying on her back in a pool of her own blood, and the right side of her head was pretty much gone. It no longer looked like a head. Her right eye, they couldn't even find it. It had been completely destroyed.
Just fucking shredded.
Yeah. Now, in the utility room, they found a bloody fingerprint on the freezer. Now, luckily, one investigator took a photo of the print before Dr. Stone tried to lift it, because as the print was being lifted, it was somehow ruined in the process and was no longer able to be used.
What?
But luckily, because they had a photo of it, they were still able to use it later on for comparison.
Yeah. Damn.
Now, bloody footprints were also found in the kitchen. They seemed to be from a relatively small set of feet.
Womanly, if one might say.
One might say. Now, a fingernail was also found. Now, it's not explained why, but I can't read what about this fingernail made them think this, but they believed that it was from a woman. So they assumed that it was Betty's, and they decided to bag it up for evidence. Now, this was a good idea in theory, but less favorable in reality due to the fact that the officer picked up the fingernail with his bare hands before bagging it. Now, it's also noted that a sunglass lens was found at the scene and that it was also picked up with bare hands, though I can't find whether or not it was the same officer who did it. So I don't know if this is the same guy or this is two
just
different
a
guys.
fucking handful of idiots.
But these motherfuckers are just letting everybody come into the scene, and then they're just
touching
picking up
everything
evidence
with their hands, getting their fingerprints all over the place.
It's a
and
ruckus.
the one fingerprint they had, they didn't fucking get it.
Yeah. They are able to compare it later. They are still able
With
to
the
use it
picture?
from the photo.
Okay.
But like the fingerprint itself wasn't lifted properly. And spoiler alert, it was Candy's fingerprint.
Ooh.
Now, they had found blood all over the bathroom, like I mentioned before. And they even found it in the shower drain, leading them to believe that the killer had showered in the home. So it seems that Candy showered in the Gore's home just because she was literally covered in blood. And then she went home and showered again so she could like properly clean herself and clean her clothes and everything.
Yeah, she's probably like, I can't just walk outside in broad daylight with blood all over me, so.
Right. Now, in the TV show, and this is a strong caveat, this is in the TV show because I couldn't find this other places. But in the TV show, the investigators find a letter that Betty had written that day. It was noted that it was written that day to her mother saying that she had been very stressed and busy recently, but that she was so lucky to have a friend like Candy to help her with Elisa. Now, I found some people online saying the same thing, that this letter was a real thing and that it existed. But I could not find this from credible sources. And now no one said that this letter didn't exist or it's not true, but they didn't mention it at all. So I'm leaning towards, I would venture to say it's more likely that this letter was maybe made up and people saw the show and assumed it was based on facts and maybe it was an artistic liberty of the show. But I do not know. Now, normally with something like this, I would just leave it out because if I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't want to like spread misinformation.
Yeah.
The reason that I'm bringing it up, though, is because if this letter did exist and if anyone knows or can find a source to say for sure whether or not this letter existed, please let me know because I've looked everywhere and I cannot find an answer. But if this letter did exist, I think this is very important because Betty asked her that day if she was having an affair with Alan. So if she was writing a letter to her mom that morning saying, Candy's such a good friend, I'm so lucky to have her, that would make me believe that she did not know about this affair. And so that begs the question, did Betty suspect Alan and Candy's affair at the time of writing this letter, or did something happen in between writing the letter and Candy coming over that tipped her off to it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like what was Candy's and Betty's conversation actually how it went? Or I don't know, maybe she went there saying like, hey, I am having an affair with your husband, I'm sorry. And then that's when everything hit the fan.
Or a third scenario is, or did Betty ever know about the affair at all?
Oh.
Because Candy says that Betty said, did you guys have an affair or whatever? And that's what happened. And that's what set Betty off. And then Candy was just defending herself.
Yeah.
But Betty never told anyone else that she thought they were having an affair. She never asked Alan about the affair.
Damn.
So did she find out in between? Did she already know? Was she just bullshitting her mom because she didn't want to worry her mom? Did the letter not exist?
Was she trying to just make everything look fine?
Right.
That's
or did it happen the way that Candy says
really,
it happened?
Yeah, that's a good.
So that's why it's like, I don't know about this letter. And I'm just going to be honest. I know some people are going to be like, why don't you take the time to do the research? But I did. I can't find it. I spent fucking so many hours on this case and I cannot find. I have found people saying that this is true, but I don't know that I trust these specific sources that I'm reading it.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to like represent it as a fact. So that I'm just giving you the warning. Now,
sorry, I'm looking up pictures of them and that's what I was doing before.
You're good. You're good. Now, Alan, so we're going to put that out of our minds, though, and we are going to ignore that letter because we do not know.
The maybe letter.
Yes. I just wanted to, I go down rabbit holes in my mind, and I'm like, wait, this fucking changes everything if this is true. But
yeah.
I have a feeling it's probably not.
That was me when I was like, oh, was she actually pregnant or? So.
Right. It does, yeah. So, Alan, we're going back to after everyone's finding this out.
Back again.
Alan was appreciative that Candy and Pat had kept Elisa while he got a grasp on the situation. But after a bit, Alan knew that it was time to take Elisa home and inform her that her mommy was now in heaven and would not be coming back. When Alan told Elisa that her mother was gone, she of course burst into tears, causing Alan to cry too. Then Candy, who had stayed to support Alan through this difficult conversation, began to cry too. She then pulled Alan and Elisa into a big group hug, and the three cried together. And that's why I say absolutely fuck this woman.
Yeah.
Even if she was attacked.
She's not, like, does she have any mental problems?
I think I would say she has a fucking lot.
Yeah.
A lot of mental issues.
Yeah.
Now,
it sounds like, it does sound like she's definitely in very much denial. Like, she is acting like she had nothing to do with that. And
or
just
she's
playing the fucking victim per se.
But that's where it's like, okay, but was she really in denial? Like, she didn't believe that she could have done that? Or was she just smart and thinking, I have to act normal? How would I act if I had nothing to do with this? I would cry and hug them and whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
So now, as you can imagine, after someone is brutally axe murdered, like, the community was terrified. They thought there was this crazy axe murderer on the loose.
Yeah, they're like, nobody's safe.
And they're like, who's next? Anyone could be next.
Yep.
So while it's true that there was an axe murderer on the loose, Dr. Stone actually kind of thought there was no need for the community to be scared. He felt that the sheer number of wounds and the fact that they were inflicted mainly to Betty's face showed that this attack was not a random act of violence, but a personal attack carried out by someone who knew Betty closely. So Dr. Stone, of course, is saying this after the fact that we know it was Candy. So
yeah.
But if he knew that in that moment, like he says he did, good for him.
Yeah.
Because smart. Now, one of the neighbor girls who often played with Elisa told police that she had seen Candy leaving the Gore home that day as she was walking over to ask if Elisa could come out and play. With this information, police were sure that Candy must have been the last person to see Betty alive. So they called her in for questioning. Before meeting
No, I went to Target. I had to go get a Father's Day card.
Yep. Now, before meeting with police, Candy called a man named Don Crowder, who was an attorney that she knew from church, of course, for advice.
Dude, this church is a cult. I'm convinced.
Yeah, it's like literally, I think everyone in this town goes to this church. Like, this is what it seems like. Now, she calls him for advice because he's an attorney, but he's actually a civil litigation attorney and not a criminal defense attorney.
So he doesn't have any fucking clue what he's doing.
He doesn't really have that type of experience, but he tells Candy not to worry. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. The police are just doing their due diligence, and they're just trying to form a timeline and figure out, like, who saw her last and what what happened and everything.
Like, little do you know, I fucking did it, so.
Yeah. So Crowder told Candy that he believed that it was probably just some drifter who had killed Betty, and he's probably on the way to the next town anyway. So Candy goes in for her interview, and she's just telling herself there's nothing to worry about. They would never think it's me. They think it's some drifter, some crazy axe murderer. And she's kind of right at this point. Like, they just think they're interviewing, like, the last person to see Betty.
Yeah, they have nothing to go on besides the one bloody fingerprint that they can't identify
that they don't
yet.
know yet. Yeah. So police asked her what she did after leaving Betty's house that day. And like you joked about before, Candy repeated the same thing she had already been telling everybody. She went to Target, her watch stopped, blah, 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 blah. They went to see the movie. Now, I
also say, I didn't know that Target has been around that long.
Dude, Target, pop in. Yeah, how long? Google. do.
Google time. Oh, 1962.
1962.
The world's...
Damn, that's like fucking 60 years of Target.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I love that come up for Target because they really got somewhere.
Yeah, good for Target. So the police also asked her what shoes she was wearing that day. And she told them that she was wearing her blue sneakers. Now, just as a reminder, she was wearing her flip-flops. And they call them like sandals or something, or plastic sandals. They
call them thongs. My mom said they used to call them thongs.
Oh, yeah. Flip-flops they did.
Yeah.
But sorry. I meant in the book. Oh. They keep calling them her plastic sandals, and in my mind that just means flip-flops. But they're plastic sandals. I'm gonna say flip-flops, and maybe they're not exactly flip-flops. But
that gives me like the jelly sandals. Did you ever have those?
No.
I can smell them. If you've ever had jelly sandals, look them up.
I don't even know what that is.
They were my favorite fucking sandals. They're like the glittery, like rubber ones. Hold on.
Huh. Oh, they were my
I can picture what you're saying. Sandals.
So okay,
these ones.
Yeah, those are dope.
They're fucking awful.
Now,
awesome.
So the day of the crime, she is wearing her plastic sandals. She commits the murder. She gets her toe cut open, so she has to bandage it up, and she wants to cover it. She doesn't want anyone to see. She has a bloody toe because they're going to find out that she had gone to see Betty. So she put on the blue sneakers. So when police asked her what shoes she's wearing, she tells them, I was wearing my blue sneakers. Now, it's important because we'll get to people later on. They say, we saw her wearing sandals that morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like she would always wear those sandals. Like we know that she was wearing those sandals.
We saw her leave
and
the
then
house.
We noticed she changed her shoes when she came back to pick up the kids. So, important point. Now, she knew that this was going to be a little bit suspicious, and she had actually already like cut up those sandals with scissors and threw them away, like trying to destroy them. And after just 2 hours of questioning with the police, Candy was free to go. And at this point, Candy was still pretty confident that she would not be caught. And the police really didn't have any reason to suspect her. They just thought it was Betty's friend, and she went to pick up Elisa's swimsuit, and they're like, yeah, makes sense.
Well, yeah, 2 hours too. I feel like that says a lot if you're only there for 2 hours.
Right.
Like if they really have something on you, you're there for
they're trying to break
time.
You.
Yeah.
Now, in Alan's initial interrogation, investigators had outright asked him if he had ever had or was having an affair. At the time, Alan told them no, he had never had an affair. He later says that he lied because he thought the affair had nothing to do with the investigation. He had broken it off 7 months prior to the murder, and life was back to normal at that point.
Once again, a fucking idiot.
Yeah, but it is like 7 months. But also don't fucking lie to the police when your wife gets murdered.
Damn, it was 7 months at that point?
Now, like I said, it's at first he's thinking it has nothing to do. However, Alan changed his tune after the police talked to his daughter, Elisa. She mentioned that Candy had dropped her off at Bible school the day of the murder, but had left for a few hours before she came back to pick her up. So again, Candy was really late picking the kids up. She was gone so much longer than she should have been. So after hearing this, Alan thought maybe the affair is important to the investigation after all. Mm-hmm. Now, it also didn't help that investigators were looking at Alan a little bit sideways. Of course, statistically, we know that when a married woman is killed, it is most often the husband who did it. And yes, Alan had been out of town, but the police were kind of wondering, well, could he have paid someone to do this for him? Mm-hmm. So with all of this, Alan just decides, hey, maybe lying to the police isn't a good look for me right now.
Oh, wow. One time he's ever been fucking smart.
Right? So he decides to come forward and tell the police the truth. He did have an affair with Candy, who was indeed the last person to see his wife alive. Now, with this, the investigators, of course, call Candy back in for questioning. When she got there, they asked to take Candy's fingerprints. They told her that they were taking fingerprints from everyone who had been in the home recently so they could narrow down all the prints from the home. But really, of course, we know that they wanted her prints to compare them to the photo of the bloody print on the freezer. Now, at this point, police still don't really think that Candy could have done this. It was a 3-foot axe. It was heavy. There were 41 blows to the woman's face. Like, and Candy's just a little small,
like a
little
petite
housewife.
little lady, yeah.
Like, they would have taken like a lot of strength, and it was just horrifically violent. And they just didn't really think this little housewife could do something so horrific. But still, like, they're like, okay, she's the only person that they knew of that would have a motive. They can't think of any other motive for wanting Betty dead besides this affair that Candy and Alan were having. And of course, Alan was out of town. So they had to just do their due diligence to rule her out. And that's really how they were thinking about it. They're like, okay, we got to rule her out. There's no way she could have done this, but we got to rule it out.
They're like, they're best friends. There's no way.
So they take her prints and they just let her go home. But they asked her to come back the next day to complete a polygraph test. She says yes, and then she headed straight home, where she called the attorney, Don Crowder, and asked him to meet with her and Pat so she could get advice on the polygraph. So that evening, the three of them met at Crowder's office. And as soon as Candy started talking, Don interrupted, and he told the Montgomerys that in order for their conversation to be protected by attorney-client privilege, they would need to write him a check. So it was officially like a legal conversation and not a friendly one. Like, they were doing business.
Yeah.
So Pat gave Don a check for $100. And Crowder told Candy, just don't worry about it. The police were just doing what they had to do. But he also told her, don't take the polygraph. Do not take the polygraph. And this is great advice. Don't take a polygraph ever, even if you're innocent.
Oh, I'd fail that bitch. I'd be so nervous that all of my answers would be off the chart.
Right. That's why he says don't take the polygraph. But he did say instead of taking the police's polygraph, he would set her up with his own polygraph expert so she could turn the results over to the police if they were in her favor. So, like, if she passed it, they can give it to police.
But if she doesn't, then they're like,
they don't have to. They don't have to ever know that she did it.
Yeah.
So, before the
how is Pat feeling through all this? Because he's like, got to have a fucking clue.
I am so curious about this because you have to remember Pat knew that Alan and Candy were having an affair. So, but I think at this point he did not think she had anything to do with it. Why would you? It's so gruesome.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
Now, before the scheduled polygraph with the police, remember this is the next day after her second interrogation, Candy called Crowder and asked if they could meet alone beforehand. Crowder agreed, and he invited Candy to his home. When she arrived, she told him that she could not take the polygraph as the results would not be good for her. Crowder asked her if Alan did it and what she knew about the crime, to which Candy responded, no, Alan didn't do it. Crowder then asked her how she knew for sure that it wasn't Alan, to which Candy responded, quote, because I did it, end quote.
Oh my God.
She then proceeded to tell Don what happened. And again, she's claiming that it was self-defense. She tells Don the story that Betty came at her, according to Don and Candy. Okay. I want you, like, this is her defense. He becomes her defense attorney.
Right.
So this is what they're saying. Crowder then advised Candy to make sure she did not tell this to anyone else, not even Pat. Soon after making this confession, the police got results of the fingerprint analysis. Of course, the bloody print at the scene belonged to Candy Montgomery. This information was quickly leaked to the press, and the story exploded.
Tomatoes.
In the media.
Tomatoes, get your tomatoes ready.
Now, once Crowder caught wind of this, he contacted police and asked that when they were ready to file charges against her, they call him to let him know. And he says that he and Candy will then come down to the station so she can turn herself in. And Candy was indeed arrested on June 27th, just 2 weeks after the murder, like to the day. And she did indeed turn herself in, but was later released on bail before the trial.
She probably just fucking realized, like, hey, she doesn't seem like a dumb person to me. So I think she sounds like she's pretty smart. So she probably realized, like, hey, they're going to catch me whether I tell them it was me or not. So maybe I should just tell them it was me, and then I can play self-defense.
Well, at that point, once they file charges against her, like if she doesn't turn herself in, like they're going to come after her. And like, you know, they might just like come in your home where your children are and all of this.
Yeah.
And yeah. So Crowder, who again was a litigator, not a criminal attorney, ended up defending Candy alongside his rookie colleague named Rob Udeshen, who had only graduated law school 2 years prior, but had worked on criminal cases for those 2 years. So he's a newbie.
He's a rookie.
He is a rookie. Now, Udeshen told Texas Monthly's Michael Hall in 2023 that it was clear from Candy's initial story that it was self-defense, but it was unclear what had motivated such overkill. Because remember, she was alive for the first 40 wounds that were made. Now, he says that he and Crowder knew that this was going to be the biggest hurdle to their argument of self-defense. So they decided to have Candy evaluated by a psychiatrist to try and bring back some of her memories of the attack and to just figure out what had set her off so badly that she kept hitting Betty when she was no longer a physical threat to Candy. If they couldn't explain the overkill, they knew that the jury would never buy the self-defense argument. So, like I said, they have Candy evaluated by this psychologist. And in some of these sessions, Candy was hypnotized in an attempt to bring back some of her memories, as she was claiming at the time that she didn't really remember the attack itself or exactly like the details of what happened. And she only knew that Betty had come at her with an axe and that she had ended up killing Betty in self-defense. But she's like, you know, all those details that we went through were fuzzy at the time.
Dude, hypnotism freaks me out. Hardcore freaks me out.
We're going to talk a lot about it and how it should not be used in a court of law. But it is in this case.
It's not anymore, right? I don't think I've heard of it being used.
It is.
Oh, it is?
Yes. And I have it in here. I think it's outlawed in 22 states.
Oh,
but there's still a lot of states letting that bullshit in.
That's crazy.
Now, during one of these sessions, Candy had a breakthrough. The hypnotist had Candy walk through the day of the attack in detail, and her memories conveniently just came flooding back in detail.
How convenient.
Candy began to panic as she told the hypnotist about Betty shushing her during the struggle. And the hypnotist pushed her to go deeper and deeper into this feeling, which apparently brought back a traumatizing, repressed memory of her allegedly emotionally abusive mother shushing her in a hospital waiting room during an emergency visit. So just to go back, like last week, we talked about during the attack, Candy was like trying to tell Betty, you don't have to do this. Like, I don't want Alan. I don't want Alan. And Betty like just looked at her and said, shh. And this is when Candy just fucking like lost it and
41
like
times.
pushed her and like, yeah, and actually did the killing. So now what they're trying to say is, oh, she broke and you know, she's like, and then Betty said, shh. And the hypnotist is like,
and then Betty
go
turned
deeper.
into her
What is that
mother,
about?
and Candy is like, I need to fucking kill my mom for telling me to shut the fuck up in a waiting room.
So that's the thing is, basically, this memory that they're talking about was, I believe Candy was, I've read both 4 years old and 6 years old, so I don't know which one it is, but she's a little kid.
Okay.
And she had cut her hand open on something. So they go to the emergency room, and her mom, who's like apparently like kind of emotionally abusive to Candy, according to Candy, is like, you know, Candy's like crying in the waiting room, and her mom like shushes her. And apparently in this therapist's professional opinion, Betty shushing Candy during such like a during a time of such heightened emotions and like just adrenaline inducing violence had caused Candy to break from reality, because the shushing like sent her back to this emotionally traumatic thing with her mom. And so she broke from reality, and she just spiraled into a violent rage. And that's why even when Betty was no longer a physical threat to Candy, Candy could not stop attacking her. That is what they're trying. That is the basis of their defense. that's how they're explaining this overkill.
I mean, can that happen though? 41 fucking times? Like, that's a lot of overkill. For a small little lady like that, that's overkill.
Like I said in episode 1, Candy is acquitted of this crime. So I am not suggesting otherwise, except I would like to say that to me, it sounds like absolute fucking horseshit.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm not on the jury, so I don't get to decide. However,
dude, that's what's crazy about juries. Have you ever gone to jury duty? Sorry, another tangent.
No.
When I went, you have to fill out like a whole questionnaire they send you before you go, and you even get pre-selected to be selected. So I went. Meanwhile, this was I feel like this was right after COVID. So it was like they were just getting back into like routine things. So I spent like a week for them to tell me I wasn't picked for the jury. But when
I was so disappointed.
I was so no,
literally
actually,
anyone else.
I was like, thank fucking God, because I was so nervous. Like, I thought I was on fucking trial for something. The way they like sit you in this room, I had a mask on.
They kind of like interrogate you.
They do, because you have to submit this like questionnaire. And the one question they asked me about, and I was like, I don't even know what the fuck to say to that. Because in my mind, I'm into true crime. So I'm like, the defense is going to...
I love this. Emily, by the way, I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but I remember you wanting to get onto this jury.
I was so excited.
She was so excited. She's like, I want to get off work.
Yeah, and well, I was off work for like a week.
Wait, hold on. I'm going back to this time. I remember thinking it was so fucking funny what you said. What did they asked you?
Because I straight up told them I have no idea why I wrote that down.
Because didn't they ask you if
I don't remember.
Should someone are they innocent until proven guilty or something that is like court 101? And Emily put, well, I think if they're on trial, they probably did something wrong.
No, that was another girl that was there that was trying to. She couldn't like get that.
That wasn't
she
you.
Couldn't get over that. Like she couldn't get over like if they're in court, then
I don't
they're
know
guilty.
why. I thought that was you that said that. I'm like,
no.
That's literally True Crime 101. Is that like you're not supposed to say that if you're going to be on a jury. You're supposed to say no, they're innocent until they're proven guilty.
Well, mine was kind of along those lines, I guess, but like I don't remember what the question was, but it was like along the lines of, how are you going to know if they're telling the truth or whatever? And I said my answer was, well,
their aura was pink or purple.
Their aura was dark. I think my answer was like, well, I am going to take whatever they say with a grain of salt because they're going to do and say whatever they can to prove that they're not guilty. And that's where I was like, well, you can't say that because... like that's
you're supposed because they're not pledging that.
Yeah, they're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and that's why I was kind of like he asked me that, and I was like, oh fuck, I don't think I knew how this shit actually went. So like all I could say was I don't know why I put that.
That's good though that they.
Like,
it's good. Right, they're doing their due diligence.
To like okay, sit down.
It's good though.
Dude, yeah, it was fucking terrifying. They make you feel very. And I was like
you're in trouble.
I mean, I was also like 24 at the time, I think. So it was like. I was like a child in my mind.
See, I wouldn't want to be. I would not want to be on the jury on a murder trial or something because you just don't know if it's going to be like cut and dry or if it's going to be something like this that is so difficult and like I don't want that much power
it's like
in
there's
my
only
hands.
2 people that know and the one person you don't know if they're telling the truth and the other person is dead.
And you're like if this really happened, I can't get over the overkill personally.
Same.
But like, let's just say it was just like 5 wounds or something. Like, I feel like
I could believe it if it was like less than like 10.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. So let's get back.
That's my problem. Oh, it's heavy as fuck.
Now, like I said, this whole like psychotic break thing, like it took her back to childhood trauma.
That's what they were running with.
I think it's. And I'm not saying that's bullshit. I know that can happen and that is a real thing. I just feel like the memory that they're talking about isn't that traumatic. I don't know. Someone's going to yell at me for saying this, but I think she's full of shit and she fucking sucks. Still, though, this was the defense that they would later use in court. Now, during the jury selection, Don Crowder addressed the jury pool outright, telling them, quote, Candy Montgomery killed Betty Gore. She did so with an axe. She did so in self-defense. The homicide was justified. We have quite a story to tell. Mrs. Montgomery will take the stand, and she intends to testify. End quote. Now, the courtroom was shocked because up until this point, Candy had never admitted anything publicly.
Yeah.
And everyone expected Candy to deny that she had killed Betty, and they thought she was going to plead not guilty.
Yeah, they're like,
and
we're going to have a
all of
case
these
here.
things.
Yeah. But, like, for them to say justified is crazy. Like, that's fucking wild.
Well, I mean, I think they mean justified, like,
As in
legally because it
self-defense?
was self-defense. Yeah.
Dude, that's crazy.
Now, the trial began on October 21st, 1980. Throughout the trial, Candy was criticized by the media for being unemotional, which Candy later defends by explaining that she was on a lot of psychiatric medication at the time. She did break down at one point on the stand, though, when her attorneys pushed her while asking her to walk them through exactly what happened during the attack. Mm-hmm. They pulled out the murder weapon during the questioning. And they're like, is this what you killed her with? And this led to a huge emotional outburst from Candy, which pleased her attorneys because they wanted the jury to see her
they're like,
upset
see,
and
she's
distraught.
so distraught when she's put under pressure.
Now, according to Love and Death, Candy's husband, Pat, was also called as a witness. And he stood by Candy and supported her throughout the whole trial. He testified that he had discovered the affair between Candy and Alan, but that he had decided to forgive Candy for this, as he felt he had played a role in causing the affair because he was emotionally closed off to her at the time. Alan also took the stand during trial, of course. He was reportedly very passive during his testimony, during which Crowder begins to suggest that there is no way that Candy could have planned to kill Betty. And Alan doesn't really disagree with this argument at all when he's on the stand. Mm-hmm. This, and like Alan's testimony in general, like enraged Betty's family. They're like, she brutally murdered your wife, and she's admitting to it. But they're questioning Alan about the affair. And in the show, they show this like part in the show. And again, the show is based very closely off this book. Mm-hmm. And they're asking him questions like, well, do you think Candy was in love with you? Do you think she was jealous? And he's like, no, I honestly don't. Like, you know, it had been 7 months and, you know, everything was normal and nothing was going on and blah, 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 blah. And it almost seems like he should have been a witness for the defense and not the prosecution. Yeah. Is the way it comes across.
Oof. I'd be pissed if I was her family too.
Exactly. Now, in order to prove that Candy had acted in self-defense, the defense would have to prove that a handful of criteria were present during the attack. Now, I'm going to describe a very generalized, because I am not an attorney, if you guys don't know this. I am not. But
surprise.
And this varies by state. So if you are going to prove self-defense, there are like, I'm going to call them boxes that you have to check. Mm-hmm. They do vary by state, and they've changed over time, like when new laws are put into act and everything like that. So this isn't the same in every state. But from this case, from what I've read, this seems like these are the criteria that they had to prove in order to prove self-defense.
Okay.
So.
Damn, I feel like who decides those? Because that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, the court system. Now, again, I'm not a legal expert. This is just the way I understand it. So the first thing is innocence. They had to show that Candy was an innocent victim of unlawful aggression before she perpetrated the unlawful aggression in self-defense. Does that make sense? She couldn't be she couldn't have initiated the attack. Okay. She had to be the victim of some sort of unlawful aggression before you are legally justified in displaying unlawful aggression towards someone else. Mm-hmm.
What'd she say? Her fucking toe?
Well, she says that Betty swung the axe at her first. That's her story.
Yeah, but how
and
does
then
somebody know
they
that?
fought over it, and she was able to get it. Yeah, and her toe, that was the first swing.
See, I think that's where I wouldn't be able to. That's why I don't think I could be on a jury. And this goes back to my question that I answered on my thing, because how do you know that she's not lying? Like, yes, they swear an oath in court, but like, how do you know that they're not just lying under oath?
Because
I think that's
the
what I couldn't-
prosecution's job then, to question her and show her and show that they, think she's lying.
Yeah.
Or to use evidence to show that the evidence doesn't match her story and things like that. So,
but how do you have evidence when it's only her recollection?
Well, they have evidence at the crime scene, and we'll get into it a little bit in just a moment. So now, okay, so they had to show that she was the victim of this unlawful aggression before she orchestrated unlawful aggression towards Betty. Mm-hmm. Now, the defense's story does check this box, as they claim that Betty had swung the axe at Candy first. The second thing that they had to show is that the threat against Candy was imminent, meaning that action had to be taken immediately in order to avoid being seriously injured or killed. So they can't, it's not like Betty called her and said, I'm going to kill you, and then Candy went over there and killed her, because that's not an imminent threat. Candy could call the police or lock the doors or something. But the fact that an axe was being swung at her directly in that moment checks this box. There was an imminent threat. That's one of the biggest things about self-defense.
But couldn't they say once you have the axe, then the threat is no longer there?
That's another box. That's box. That's box 4 or 5. We're going to get there. So third, they had to show proportionality, meaning that the degree of force used by Candy was equal or lesser than the degree of force already perpetrated by Betty. So, for example, like, that saying, you can't bring, it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite. So if people are stabbing each other, or like someone's coming at you with a knife,
and you don't have anything,
you shoot them, that's not proportionality.
Right.
Now, this law, especially in Texas, has changed. Like, now, in order to prove self-defense, you don't have to have that, because they have like a stand your ground law. I don't fully understand it. Someone listening does. They can tell us about it. But it's not important in this case, because that's not how it worked at the time.
Yeah.
So they did this because Candy was using the same weapon that she says that Betty was using against her. So this is an automatic checked box.
Right.
Because it's the axe. It's literally the exact same weapon. Now, fourth, they had to show that Candy attempted to avoid acting with unlawful aggression. So she only did it because she was forced to. She had no other option, and she made attempts beforehand to avoid having to do this.
Yeah.
So they checked this box when Candy testifies that she had begged Betty to stop and had tried to escape, but that Betty would not let her go. Like, if you remember when we went through the whole attack, at one point Candy had made it to the door, and Betty stood in front of the door and wouldn't let her leave.
Yeah.
So box checked. Now, again, these are really specific details that are very convenient that check these boxes perfectly.
Yeah.
Just want to point that out. And if they're true, yeah. Now, this is another thing that has changed since. So this is kind of referred to a lot as like the duty to retreat. Like, it is your duty to retreat from danger unless you have literally no other option to like save yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, as of 1995, this duty to retreat is no longer a necessary part of a self-defense argument in Texas. But again, at the time of Candy's trial, it was. Now, finally, they needed to show that there was a reasonable fear of harm, which they did, because Betty is literally swinging a fucking axe at her. Mm-hmm. Now, not only was she just swinging the axe at her, but according to Candy, Betty told her matter-of-factly that she was going to kill her.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even argue, Well, how do you know that she was going to just swing the axe? Like,
yeah, like how do you know she was trying to kill you?
right. And she said, I have to kill you. So, reasonable fear of harm, I would say yes. If someone is swinging an axe at me, saying I'm going to kill you, I would assume that they're going to kill me.
I'd be pretty fucking scared. Yeah, same.
Now, all of these boxes are checked. And at first
Very
glance,
convenient.
It seems like a slam dunk self-defense case. That is, until you remember that, like we've mentioned a few times, Betty was hit with the axe 41 times and was alive for 40 of those blows. Now, we do not know when, but at some point during the first 40 blows, Betty must have become incapacitated and was no longer an imminent threat to Candy, nor was there any longer a reasonable fear of harm. So, again, there's no way to know how many blows it took. But once this point was reached where Betty was no longer able to fight back, you lose imminent threat. She's no longer an imminent danger to you. She is completely on the ground, like her skull is crushed.
Yeah.
She cannot fight back.
No way she's standing up to get the axe to
No
hit
longer
you anymore.
No longer an imminent threat, and Candy no longer has a reasonable fear of harm. So 2 of those boxes have flown out the window at some point in between these blows.
Damn.
Now, whenever this point was reached, again, there's no way for us to know if it was blow 5 or if it was blow 15 or 25.
Well, yeah, she was just
But
landing
when there
them.
are 41, you know that it happened at some point. And every blow after that blow is no longer self-defense.
Yeah, that's murder.
That would be considered by the court intentional murder. Now, for this reason, Candy's argument was considered to be one of imperfect self-defense. So, what is imperfect self-defense? In basic terms, to qualify as imperfect self-defense, almost all of the elements have to be met, except for the reasonable belief. Now, there are 2 scenarios that qualify to replace reasonable belief. The first is when there is a mistaken belief, meaning that the belief in the need to use force was mistaken, but was not malicious or intended to harm. So let me give you an example of what this means. So let's say your husband is out of town and you wake up in the middle of the night to a man standing at the end of your bed, and he's wearing a ski mask and he's pointing a gun at you. So you pull the gun out of your nightstand and you shoot him. And then it turns out that it was just your asshole husband who was like trying to scare you so he could go viral with a TikTok video of him scaring you. And the gun was fake. It was a squirt gun that he painted black. In this case, the need to use force was mistaken because it was your husband. He was not going to hurt you. He was just trying to prank you. And you were safe. You were never going to be hurt. But
is this a true story?
No, I just
like,
made up.
Wow, that would be fucking wild, though.
No, but I'm just making up the scenario. But like,
no, yeah, that makes sense though.
So this shows you like this is a mistaken belief, but it is in that moment you had reasonable belief that anyone would have to think that you are in danger and you need to defend yourself.
Okay.
So that is one scenario. Now the second is when there is an honest but unreasonable belief. Meaning they honestly believed that they were in imminent danger, but that this belief is not reasonable, like to the average person. So, for example, if someone attacks a bus driver because the voices in their head are telling them that the bus driver is going to crash the bus and kill everybody, but they just have schizophrenia, that's an unreasonable belief, yet they truly believed it.
Okay.
So that it can fall under imperfect self-defense where if you think the bus driver is taking over the bus and is going to murder everybody and you stop them and you're a hero for stopping them, you know, it wasn't true. It was wrong. But that falls under, you know, you can be found not guilty by, and that might be reason of insanity, but you get what I'm saying. You get the point.
Yeah, but that's such a fine line. Like how, I mean, even if she said that, like, I honestly felt that my life was in danger.
But that's where, this is where they are trying to explain the overkill.
Yeah.
Because they're saying it's that second scenario that I was going over, that it was unreasonable belief.
Oh.
And that it was the shushing.
Yeah.
That sent her into this like break from reality.
This like manic fucking murder.
Right. And that explains the overkill, is because she couldn't understand that Betty was no longer a threat.
So now, she just kept going until it was
right.
It passed.
Now I'm going to tell you why I think this is fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
And this, again, is just my opinion. I don't know anything more than what I'm reporting on.
We don't have a medical degree.
But this whole thing about, like, what this memory was, that was, like, this childhood traumatic memory, in that memory, her life was not in danger.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand.
I don't see how that memory could make that emotion come out. But I can see if that was the memory she went to, and maybe it was like something that led up to that, or something that happened with her mom before that. But like,
maybe,
I don't know. I don't think emotional trauma is enough for me to murder someone for.
I just think that if someone attacked me with an axe and I had to fight them back, the moment that I can tell that they can't fight back, especially if it was my fucking friend.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was you and I just fucking beat you with an axe.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm going to do as soon as you can't fight back? Is I'm going to lay the axe down and I'm going to run outside fucking screaming louder than I've ever screamed in my life. Mm-hmm. Help, somebody help, because I wouldn't want to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's where it's like, not only is it the overkill, but then she makes up this story and she showers and she cuts up
twice.
She cuts up the flip-flops and she hides the evidence and she tries to cover it all up. So it's like, okay, well, when did you snap back into reality?
Yeah.
Because you were in reality when you went to shower while you were still at the house. Mm-hmm. You were still in reality when you left the fucking crying baby there.
Yeah. I don't know. That's wild.
So I don't know.
But I also, I mean, I don't think she's innocent. I think she fucking murdered her. I don't think that it should be self-defense at all. But I could also see where she didn't know, like, what to do after, and she panicked.
Why wouldn't you stop hitting her?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if that's true, where she was in this, like, manic state and, like, she just got triggered and fucking went to town. And also, if it's true that she couldn't, like, recognize when to stop, then I don't know.
I could see, this is the thing, is I hate the argument that the shushing sent her into this break and it's just I could almost more believe that, like, once she started hitting her, she was just so detached from what was happening because it was her friend and she literally had no choice, if what she's saying is true.
Yeah.
She had no choice but to fucking smack her head. And imagine seeing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let alone doing it. And I would buy into that argument more, that, like, she was just so in shock from what was happening that she detached to the point where, like, she didn't even know if Betty was dead or alive. She was just, it was just like, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. But then when they tie in this whole, well, she was hypnotized and it was, you know, childhood trauma and because her mom shushed her when she was 5 or whatever. I'm like, that's too much for me.
Yeah, me too.
I
don't know. I don't know.
Really,
I still can't get over how the murder weapon, because it's one thing to, like, stab somebody like 41 times, but to hit somebody in the head with an axe 41 times, that's like, I don't know if you've ever held an axe, but they're fucking heavy. Like, you can't just keep picking it up and doing that, like, jackhammering
I think of those axe videos where it's like a hot shirtless guy in the woods.
Yeah.
And
or the axe
like,
competitions.
He's just, like, hitting it in the most, like, sexually aggressive way ever. And you're like, okay, I understand you're muscular, but this is kind of, like, weird.
Yeah. But
that's what I think. It's like those guys are I mean, they might be using, like, bigger axes, like heavier axes.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know. That's literally what I was thinking about when I could.
Well, because you have to, like, pull it out and then you have to pull it back.
That's what I'm fucking
Go
saying.
back down. Like,
and you're not pulling it out of a piece of wood. You're pulling it out of your friend's head.
Oh, that's what I don't know. I don't know. 41 times is a lot, especially like that had to have taken her at least like a half an hour. Like that could not have been fast.
That's what I want someone to do an experiment and tell me. I'm gonna watch.
How long are you gonna be?
I want to pull up one of those Axe videos and just count how many times it
to
how
take
long
them 41 times. Yeah.
Like I don't know. It's got to be a long time. It's got to be a long time. So anyway, with the testimony of the hypnotizing psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, Dr. Fred Faison, Candy's defense fell under the second category, like I said, of the unreasonable belief. Mm-hmm. So like we already covered, Faison testified that when Candy was around 6 years old, some places say 4, but I read 6 more often, she injured herself on some broken glass, so her mother took her to the emergency room to get stitches. Overwhelmed by a mix of blood, fear, and anxiety, Candy couldn't stop crying and screaming in the waiting room. And embarrassed by the attention from the others in the waiting room, the mother eventually tried to calm her by just being like, shh, like basically telling her to shut up with a shush.
Yeah.
Now, Faison said that in his professional opinion, when Betty Gore used a similar shushing tone with Candy, it triggered a wave of repressed memories that led to a dramatic, quote-unquote, dissociative reaction. According to Faison, this response is a type of neurosis that can induce an out-of-body experience. And those affected may act in ways that they don't consciously recognize, similar to episodes of amnesia, sleepwalking, or dreaming. Now, the defense's entire case relied on the testimony of a witness after undergoing hypnotism. And despite the fact that the use of hypnotism as a forensic science is now outlawed in 28 states, the jury bought this argument, and Candy Montgomery was found not guilty. Self-defense claimed work. Oh my God. Now, I want to talk a little bit about hypnosis and using hypnosis in court. Now, as of 2023, only 22 of the United States still allowed witness testimony from individuals who have undergone hypnosis. This number has been dwindling over the decades as the reality that hypnosis, when it comes to a court of law, as forensic evidence.
Yeah, like scientific evidence.
It's junk science. It is junk science when it comes to using it as evidence in a court of law. If you're talking about personal, emotional breakthroughs, that's different. But I'm talking about using it as evidence in a court of law.
To like recall memory and shit.
It is bunk. It is junk. Now, the roots of hypnosis...
It's bunky junky.
It is bunky and junky. The roots of hypnosis lie with an 18th century Parisian doctor named Franz Anton Mesmer, who would treat sick patients by putting them into trances and basically waving his hands around them in a practice called mesmerism. So fun fact, this is actually where the term mesmerize comes from. To mesmerize somebody comes from this Dr. Mesmer, who would put them, invented mesmerism.
He waved his hands and you were out like a light.
Right.
Supposedly.
So mesmerism was slowly adapted into hypnotism. And Texas Monthly's Michael Hall explains that the core belief of the practice is that hypnotism is a quick and easy way to put the nervous system, quote, into a new condition which may be rendered eminently available in the cure of certain disorders, end quote. And that's according to hypnotism trailblazer Dr. James Braid, who is actually the guy who created a groundbreaking hypnotic technique where he would have his patients focus on a light and they would end up in a sleep-like trance. Mm-hmm. Now, doctors still use this technique that was invented by Dr. Braid. They still use it today to help change patient behaviors. So it's used to help people quit smoking, to quit binge eating, to help them relax, and a lot of other things.
In like a holistic way.
Okay. Right. And according to Hall, it's, quote, remarkably effective at helping people overcome their fears and traumas, end quote. However, like I said, using hypnosis in a clinical setting to help patients is very different from using it in a court in a court of law to prove guilt or innocence. And according to Dr. Steve Lynn, who is a psychology professor who does research that focuses on hypnosis and memory, he's been doing this research since the 1980s, and his studies show that hypnosis does not improve memory. Does not improve memory. That is a very, very important point when you're using this testimony as evidence in a court of law. Not only does it not improve memory, his studies show that it can actually make memory worse because people under hypnosis will often fill in gaps, like any gaps in their memory.
They're like dreaming
with stuff
with
that
random
didn't
shit.
happen.
Oh, shit.
Yes, because it like loosens your imagination, almost like in a
You're
dream-like state.
Like lucid dreaming, yeah.
Yes, and not only do they fill in those gaps, but they believe them because people, if they believe in the hypnosis,
about this after.
And that's why when you're having someone like, oh, I didn't remember, but then I underwent hypnosis, and I am sure that man is the murderer. It's not. It is bunk science, and it should not be allowed in a court of law. If you want to use hypnosis in like a therapeutic setting to help someone change their behavior, I think that's great.
Yeah.
That is great as long as they're consenting, they want to be hypnotized, whatever. But it should not be used in a fucking court of law. That blows my mind.
When
that
you're
22
dealing with
states
life
still
and
allow
death,
it.
then you should not be having no.
22 states still allow it as of 2023.
That's insane.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
That's like, I feel like there's more. Like, do more states allow that than a lie detector test, like a polygraph test?
I don't know.
Because that would be interesting.
I don't know the answer to that.
That would be interesting to know because if you can't take a polygraph test, which is pretty much science, it like records your levels of stress.
Have been shown to be bullshit too.
No, they are. That's what I'm saying. Is that if they're saying that's bullshit when it's showing your stress levels go up and down?
Yeah, it
then
is odd
how
that
is
they're like
fucking hypnotism still allowed? I don't know that.
I don't know. It's crazy.
That's monkey junkie.
However, this is what I will say is even if they were allowed to use this defense, like I think personally, and obviously I'm just fucking speculating here. If this were to happen today and they were to use that same argument and it was still allowed in court and stuff, I don't know. They would have to pick such a specific jury. I think that back then, like people didn't have all the access to information in science and knowledge of how like these things work.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they didn't know that.
I think she would have been convicted today. I think she would have. If this happened today, she would have been found guilty.
Me too.
Because I can't get over the overkill. She was alive for 40 of the 41 wounds. And I hope that she didn't feel all of them. That's all I'll say about that.
I hope she was at least unconscious for most of them. Yeah,
like I think that she would have been, I don't know, like if it would be second degree murder or manslaughter, but like she just got off. Like
no,
she didn't have to go to like a mental health facility or anything.
That's
not
wild.
that I know of, at least. Now,
well, I hope she's living in her karmic cycle for the rest of her fucking life.
We're going to talk about where she is now.
Oh, boy.
And it's real interesting.
Oh, boy.
So let's start with Alan. So after the trial, Alan quickly remarried a different woman from the same church that he, Pat, Betty, and Candy all went to. So this woman knew all of them, and she knew
fucking
what happened.
Alan, dude. He's the problem.
Now, Elisa told the Dallas Morning News that when she was 10 years old, her new stepmother forced her to read the book I've been talking about, Love and Death, that describes the entire brutal murder of her mother in detail, as well as the sexual affair between her father and the woman who murdered her mother. She says that her new stepmother forced her to read that book when she was 10 years old.
What the fuck?
So,
again, Alan, you're the problem. Why are you not protecting your wife or two daughters?
He in my opinion,
thinking with your dick.
In my opinion, Alan doesn't seem like the best dude or the best parent at all. And after noticing that patches of Bethany's hair were going missing when they would take the kids, Betty's parents decided to fight Alan for custody. And they did eventually gain full custody and took the girls.
Fuck yeah. Go Betty's family. It seems like they were the only fucking people that cared about her. He didn't even defend her in court. You have this mistress who, by the way, she only killed your wife because you were having an affair with her. Don't think that would have been a problem if you just kept it in your fucking pants.
Right.
But then to sit on stand in front of her entire family, the mother of your 2 children, and say, oh, well, I don't think that Candy had anything to do with that. I don't think that she would have done that.
This is, again, and I'm going to say, like, this is, I think, I wish I wouldn't have watched the show before doing all the research, because I'm worried that my opinion is a little bit biased from the show.
Yeah.
But, like,
that's what I'm trying to, like, see it. I'm trying to see it from her, from the way she's saying it. And I just, like, again, like, the axe being that heavy and her still going at it 41 times. I don't know. That's what I can't get over, because maybe, I don't know. I've never had psychosis or been in that, like, type of state. I don't know how long it lasts. You know, like, these are doctors. I am not a doctor.
Yeah.
So, like, they're saying it's true. Maybe it is, but I don't know. For her to not get anything, that's fucked up.
The way that the show portrays Alan's testimony, though, is like, it gives you the impression, or it gave me the impression, that he wasn't arguing because he believed what Candy was saying. Like, he believed that Betty attacked her, and I think that that could be the case. Maybe he knew Betty the best out of everyone.
Yeah.
He knew about the state of her mental health and what she was struggling with more, like, better than anyone else. So I think one possibility is that he thinks what Candy is saying is probably true, and that Betty attacked her, and that Betty was mentally unwell, and that Candy was just defending herself.
This mental break, and attacked Candy.
That is the impression that I was left with after, like, watching the way that they portrayed it on the show. Now, you could also go the other way, is that, well, maybe Alan loved Candy and he was just protecting her, and he was like, yeah, I guess Betty would do that, and it was like a lie, and he was protecting her. And because I did read somewhere too, and this is so fucked up, was that, like, someone had asked Alan, like, you know, why he wasn't super emotional at the trial and everything, and he said, and this is not verbatim, but he said something along the lines of, like, well, we weren't really getting along anyway. About his murdered wife. It's like, well, that's not really what it's about, Alan. It's about the fact that your wife a human being was brutally murdered. It's not really about how you felt about her, but okay.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Fuck Alan.
Now let's get to Candy after the trial. So after the trial, Candy and Pat moved to Georgia to get away from Candy's axe murderer reputation in Wiley, because people didn't really like her after this. I don't know why.
I wonder fucking why.
Yeah.
Probably think they're going to get axe murdered if they cross paths with her.
Now, for a while, like, Pat stuck by her side, like, all through this trial and for a while after. But they did eventually end up divorcing, which is not very surprising. Now, according to NBC News, Candy later became a licensed youth counselor in Georgia, using her maiden name for her license that was obtained in 2009. So she's just counseling the
youth of Georgia?
The youth of Georgia.
God, that infuriates me. But also, like,
this woman who said she was so emotionally unwell that she had a psychotic break and fucking murdered somebody with 40 wounds because she was shushed is now counseling Georgia's youth.
Good job, Georgia.
Good job. So...
But, like, would they know who she was if, like, she applied for a job? Because she's not a convicted anything. So
she's not convicted. She was acquitted. She was not guilty.
Maybe they didn't know maybe they didn't know all that about her.
And she used her maiden name. So it wasn't, Candy Montgomery.
Yeah.
And she was in Georgia and not Texas anymore.
Yeah, maybe they just didn't know.
They might have just not known. But yeah. And that is the story of the Friday the 13th axe murder of Betty Gore.
Good God, man.
Isn't that one fucking... you have to... I'm sorry, I hate to say this because I do feel like the show definitely takes. The show is a representation of what Candy says happened.
Yeah.
It is based on the book Love and Death that was, they interviewed a lot of people, but it's like largely based on Candy and Alan's like interviews. Mm-hmm. So it is very biased. It is off of what Candy says.
Yeah.
So I'm so like, I get so emotionally torn about these things because I have a feeling Betty's family is not very happy with it.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that like if this was not based on a true crime, you would leave the show being like it's a really good show. I fucking hate to say it. It's so good.
No, I'm definitely gonna go home and watch it.
There's also a second show that I think was made before the HBO one that's on Hulu that stars Jessica Biel as Candy Montgomery.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's called Candy.
I haven't seen that one.
That's what I was looking
I heard
up
it's not as good though. The HBO one,
I love Jessica Biel.
It's so fucking good. But I also think that's why I wanted to tell this story was because I watched the show and I was like, oh my God, this poor Candy, I feel so bad for her. This is so horrible what she had to do and whatever. Because they like really emotionally tie you in. And then I saw like another podcast that I like do this case, Sinisterhood, which if you guys don't listen to Sinisterhood, which you probably do because they're like one of the biggest podcasts out there, but they are so fucking good and I love them.
Our idol.
And one of the girls on that is an actual attorney, so she's not dumb as fuck like us when we try and talk about legal stuff.
We try our best, guys.
I really do try my best.
Just don't, like I said, take everything we say with a grain of salt.
But like we're gonna learn and like get better.
Oh
at this stuff.
yeah.
But they covered it and like they took the opposite stance. They're like, this lady's full of shit and she's a fucking murderer and she was, they
were against Candy too?
They were against Candy. Like they weren't saying that it was a completely fake story that she like just went over there and axe murdered her out of nowhere. Like
I don't think that she did that either. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, but like they were kind of against it and then I was like, oh, this is so interesting. But I just felt like, okay, this show, I don't think Betty's family is probably very happy about it. But I will say, like, the show itself, it was done very well. I thought it was really good. It makes me really sad. I don't want Betty's family. It's like, I can't imagine that. But at the same time, that's why I was like, that's why we should cover this episode. So, like, if that show is going to be out there and everyone's going to see it and think this is black and white, this is what happened, it was self-defense. I'm like, we should tell this story and, like, tell both sides. And no one really knows what happened except for Candy.
I hope those fucking youth are giving her hell. I hope they're calling her a bitch, and I hope that she's ugly now.
I don't know. This whole story is fucking horrible, and
it is, man.
And I just hate their argument for the overkill. I think I call so much bullshit on the whole shushing thing. I don't like that argument at all. And again, I know some people are going to disagree with me. I'm not saying that I'm sure that's a possibility. That's a possibility. I think it's very, very, very unlikely. But I buy more the fact that like she just was so fucking like shocked by what was happening that she just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And that I don't know.
That could have happened, but I don't know. The jury found her not guilty, so I mean, I think that does count for something because jury's like 11 people. 12. Yeah, I mean, that's 12 people that don't think. I don't know. I have my suspicion. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I just don't think that Candy was a very good person because if she was, then she wouldn't have cheated on her.
She should have gotten nothing.
That's what I'm saying. Like she,
send her to a treatment center. I don't know. But then again, you think about like if this happened to you, and you like, part of me would be like, haven't I been punished enough? I had to fucking axe murder my friend because otherwise I was going to be axe murdered. You know what I mean? Like, if it's literally true exactly the way she tells it, I don't know.
My gut is telling me it's not.
And then it also goes back to, I do kind of feel like there is like reasonable doubt. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. This one bothers me, but I want to know what you guys think after hearing this.
Yeah.
And like, if you've seen the shows and stuff, like,
I'm going to
I
go
want to
home
know
and
what you
watch.
think. So if you're listening on Spotify, you can add comments on Spotify now. So comment on this episode and let us know what you think. If you're not on Spotify, like comment on our Instagram post. It's probably already up if you're listening to this episode. Yeah, it's definitely up because there was part 1. So comment and like let us know what you think. Like if she should have been found guilty or not guilty. Do you believe the shushing story? Whatever.
Yeah.
Comment on my. I'm probably putting out TikToks about this. You can comment on those too. But yeah. Well, make sure you're following us wherever you're listening. We really appreciate that. And if you are enjoying the podcast, give us a 5-star rating and send one episode to one of your friends that you know listens to true crime.
That's your unofficial homework for the week.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate it. It means a lot. So I think court is adjourned for the day.
All right. Love you a lot. Gigi. Thanks.
Who's Gigi?
G to G. Gotta go.
Oh, G2G. Bye.
Bye.